guys. Welcome to our third show, our third TNCBA recap show. This time we're talking about Chickamauga Lake. The club's out of town for the year. We fished it April 15th and 16th. It's a 2-day event. It's been a little while since that tournament, but Kelsey had some things he was wrapping up. He's finishing up his semester. He's glad to have that weight off of his shoulders. But now it's time to talk some fishing, right, Kelsey?
That's right.
And unfortunately, Kelsey didn't get to head out there with us, but he's had some of the same experiences I had down there on Chickamauga. Me and Dad had a really good tournament built from day one to day two. So I'm going to be able to give you a lot of insight on what we had going on. So I'm excited to talk to y'all about that. But Chickamauga, Kelsey, can be finicky. It can be a place where you get a lot of bites, but at the same time, the next day she can just shut off and nothing.
You and I've both been out there and have a day where we catch 40, 50 fish and then no keepers.
Exactly.
Not one be a keeper. And then, the next day rolls in, you catch 5, but they're a good 5.
Right.
So, that lake is one of those lakes that can break your heart real quick.
Oh yeah. Or put a smile on your face. And I've had a couple of times down there like that, where it's like you just said, my personal best fish came down there, but it was also a day that I only caught that fish, nothing else, never had another bite. So it's just crazy how that can work out, that you have very few bites, but that's when the big girls are eating. So guys, we're not going to hold things up. We're going to get right into this. We're going to talk about the conditions that were going on. We're going to talk about the baits, the type of cover structure that we were fishing. But first of all, this tournament was presented to us by Kingsport CPA. We want to say thank you to them for reaching out and sponsoring this event. So let's dive right into it, Kelsey, and we'll take a quick look at what those conditions were. And I'm going to share my screen here, guys. Got a little PowerPoint for us to look at as well to go along with this. So for this event, the conditions going in were, and I don't have the practice days when other people were down here, but it was like 75, almost 80 degrees on Monday, Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
Wednesday started to cool off, but you can see here, Kelsey, look at those lows. Day 1, 52, and then day 2, man, 42 degrees,
42.
a 10-degree drop. These girls were supposed to be moving up on beds. So that type of temperature drop is really, really going to slow that movement down. And lows or highs of 65 and 62, which that's not super low for April, but that I would consider that probably about average.
Yeah, it's a comfortable temperature, but the thing is about it is it really does throw in a factor to those fish, and it does make them move a lot different than what they were planning on doing.
And we got to remember that we're talking about Florida strain here. So Florida strain can also be more affected by these cold fronts. So you going from a 75 to 80 degree day down to these 65s. We definitely had a much better wind on that first day. As you can see there, with 10 to 15 miles an hour. The second day, it was a much calmer day going throughout with less wind. But notice the water levels here. We're at a slow rise going from day 1 to day 2. But I want y'all to look at the screen over here to the right, that water level overview. Look at what happened to this place late March going into early April. So we had drastic heavy rains coming into the end of March, and this place got up to full pull, actually a little bit above full pull, right at the beginning of April. And then you can see there, for us, Douglas, Cherokee, that's sucking the bottom out of a lake, 30, 40 foot.
Oh, yeah.
So like here, it's only 3 feet. What's the big deal? But to these fish, you suck 3 feet out of that lake that quick. Most of these places that I was fishing, that I know some of these other guys were fishing, completely dry. You take 3 foot of water off of these places, and I don't catch some of my fish because they can't even get there. So
it's like you think about it. It's like you think about it. Chester Frost. That's the determining factor whether you're going to get hung up on the bottom of the boat ramp or not.
Exactly. Yeah, that little bit of water drop right there. But again, these fish are thinking about spawning. Then TVA draws that lake down super quick. Now they kind of pull back out. Then you see the water's kind of on a rise the whole time, but those fish just still are trying to reacclimate to that major change in water levels. So I think that played a big part with the guys that were down there practicing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because I think these fish were moving so much that new places were starting to have water on them. I know that I talked to Fred and Wiley, and I was talking about some of the sloughs I was going to go check on day 1. They're like, I don't even know if you're going to get in there. And there were a couple of them that I went to on day one that I went across 2 foot of water when I idled into the sluice. So it's like they're probably right. Probably on Sunday, Monday, you probably couldn't even get into some of these sloughs from where they drew that water down. But you can see here from the weights that she definitely played. She definitely played very coy. She was not an easy fishery to figure out. We had an ABA championship, Ray Scott ABA championship going on down there. And what was awkward about that, Kelsey, was most of the time we go Thursday, Friday. And why do we go Thursday, Friday for our out of towns?
To try and beat the traffic,
Try
really.
to beat the traffic, try to get away from the crowds. This tournament started on Wednesday with 200, I think maybe a few under, I don't know, it was right around 200 boats. So we got 200 boats down there fishing a tournament on Wednesday, the same 200 fishing on Thursday. Then they cut the field down to, I think, 75 on Friday. So the whole time these guys are down there practicing, they've got tons of boats. You've got somebody sitting on everything. The fish are pressured. And I went back and watched a few videos, YouTube videos of guys that were fishing that. One was the smallmouth crush guy. I don't know if you've ever watched any of his YouTube stuff. But he was talking about the pressure of it, just how crazy it was. You couldn't find a lay down or a pocket that hadn't been hit 3 or 4 times.
And you would think on a big lake like that, it really does get small when you get that kind of pressure on it.
It does, and it can happen real quick. But you can kind of see here from the weights, a lot of people dropping off from day one to day two. It certainly got tougher. I don't know if some guys were they were chasing their pattern a little bit, and the fish had moved, or if the fish that they had found were kind of running out of them. But you can see here that a lot of people their weights went down from day one to day two. Dad and I were able to pull out the win with a total of, I can't see it on here because I'm in the way, with 28-14. But with that kicker was the big player for us to help us out. Because the guys that finished second, Hall and Hamilton here, had 26-52 for their total. And I will give them mad props because they were consistent. You can see here that they had 13-34 on day one, 13-18 on day two. And they only had 4 fish there on day two. So they were sitting on some good quality fish to have 13 pounds and 4 fish. So those guys were definitely bringing it. But third place on here was, I believe, Leg and Lester. Yeah, Leg and Lester. And they had another consistent bag as well out there on Chickamauga. And they were really focusing in on some buck bass that were moving up, because you can see here that they had 12-47 and 12-18. Now, these 3 teams, as I said, were fairly consistent. We were able to get that big kicker bite. But one thing I will say about day one, Kelsey, is so many guys talked about how many fish they caught in the last hour. So those fish, you could tell, were moving up. The afternoon on day one was really sunny. So we know that those fish can go from not being up there to all of a sudden, here's all these buck bass up on beds, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and another thing is, I think that from what we were looking at that graph, the water level was starting to plane out, and it was starting to be more consistent. So your climates for them to move, they were getting more acclimated to their environment, and I think that played a big role into that. And I think that's probably why that afternoon bite was better.
And I also think about how much did it play into, how we always have a shortened day too, so that people can get loaded up and get headed home.
Oh, yeah.
So those guys that were talking, because I know from talking with them, Hodges and Lester had only 1 fish, I believe it was, going into that last hour, and caught 4 keepers in that last hour. So think about how much their day changed and what it could have been. But then you think about, man, day two, had they had that extra hour, could maybe some bigger females have moved up? Yeah. Could there have been some more fish move up? Could Hall and Hamilton have maybe pulled out that 5th keeper if they had that extra hour,
Well, just looking at that printout too that you had there, just noticing the number of fish catches and fish brought in, the difference, because you had more limits on the first day than you did on the second day of the tournament. That was something I was just looking at, and I was just thinking, that probably was probably that afternoon bite probably would have been something that would have played a factor into if you'd have just spent one more hour out there or something like
Yeah.
that. That may have been that factor that
And get some more
would
limits
have
in.
shook up the leaderboard.
And then,
Yeah.
definitely shook up the leaderboard. And then, of course, just the fishing pressure in general. Like we just talked about that tournament going on that Ray Scott. But so the big thing is you can see here first, second, and third place. I didn't have my buddy there, Kelsey, to help me out with filming these guys to talk. I know, man. It's called adulting. We got to do it all right. So I didn't have him there to help me out. So I sent these guys a Google Doc so they could kind of fill it out for me so we could at least have that. So Dad and I, main baits were a chatterbait, and that would definitely be that jackhammer chatterbait. And that was matched up with, I think it's a Zaco Gary Yamamoto trailer. And then also the lipless crankbait. Okay. And we were focusing in on grass clumps on the upper end above Dayton. And I told you that was going to probably be my plan in that last video we did when we were previewing. I didn't want to run down and mess with taking up a lot of time. That area of the lake gets real big. So we focused on the edges of channels and ditches that were heading back into spawning areas. And these edges had those sporadic grass clumps. Holland Hamilton said they really started their morning out with a swim bait. I don't know what size swim bait that was. And then they moved over to flipping a crawl style bait, and they were down on the lower end. And out of the top three, they were the only ones down there on that Saudi Creek down to the dam area. I didn't try to get too specific with people, but I kind of broke it down into 3 sections. So they said day one was a pretty strong swim bait bite with everything else on only producing smaller fish. Day 2 started slower with one on the swim bait, and then other fish came when they started flipping and pitching around those docks. And then, like I said, Hodges and Lester, they were really finessing those smaller buck bass that were moving in. They were on a Yumdinger worm and a pink floating worm, and they were up in super shallow water, temps in the mid 60s. Upper end again, up above Dayton. They were actually in the same slough where Dad and I were, where they were catching their fish. But they said it was a slow grind to find what stage the fish were in, with water levels going up and down daily. And then finally, the first day of the Derby, they found a couple areas that the fish moved up. And like I said, they caught those fish late and were able to go back there again day 2 and have a really, really consistent bite. But talking about the chatterbait, Kelsey, and you've got to have this fun down there too. Talk about just some of the bites you've got to have down there on a chatterbait, because we've had some fun down there in multiple trips with the club on a chatterbait.
Well, just looking at the lake setup itself, like, those Tennessee River lakes, chatterbait is probably going to be one of my go-to baits. I mean, it really is one of those baits down on those types of lakes. You got those long, flatter areas, more grass and stuff. You can work it through it pretty consistent without getting so much hung up. You can rip it out of there, and it's really just an ideal bait to go to.
Oh yeah, it's perfect.
As far as fish catches, man, I mean, just as well as I do, we've gone down there in June, and I mean, at that time we're throwing a green pumpkin colored type of chatterbait with that. I think I used to throw the red pearl shad or something like that.
Yeah,
it was a Kitech brand, but that's what I would throw as my trailer. And I mean,
but they'll hammer that sucker
too.
I mean, they throttle it, and you better have the right rod and reel set up, because you're gonna have to absorb that those strikes.
Sometimes they come running at you with their tail being the only thing in the water, and you have to boat flip them. So, I mean,
exactly, last minute 6-pounders, right out from under the docks.
Yeah.
So let's talk about dialing in bass migrations in the spring, because this is what really played in for me and Dad. And me and Dad didn't have any practice. So we literally drove down Wednesday night. First time on the water was going to be day 1 of the tournament. So my thinking was, and my focus was going to be, simplify it. You can't run everywhere. You can't go out and try to cover the whole lake. With your
strengths.
Yeah, you got to fish your strengths. So the key to our pattern, as it says here, was the fact that we were locating pre-spawn bass that were staging up and making their way back into shallow spawning bays. These bass would use the clumps of grass, and they'll be on the next slide, as stopping points to ambush bait as they were feeding up. Now, What played into this big, guys, was the Panoptics, and you could still do all of this without any electronics. You could fill and find that grass with the bait, but I will say that it did make it easier as we were going down this ditch line. And you can see here on the screen that it was not a huge drop in some places. We're talking 2, maybe 3 feet, 4 foot at the max, dropping off into this. And you can see here that that clump of grass is just sitting basically on the break line, and it's not a massive clump. The grass isn't that tall right now. It's very short. But these fish, as they were moving down along these breaks, because they travel along contours. Studies show, if you'll do some reading and some research, fish don't like to move through open water. They hate it. So they're going to follow these contours. So that's basically what Dad and I did is we put the trolling motor down. We started at the mouth of the slough. We had some luck on the point in one of those June events like you were talking about. So I said, dude, we're going to start right here, and we're just going to start following the ditch line. And we put it in, and we started following that ditch line, and we got some bites there on day 1. We ran a couple other sloughs, but when we came back to it on day 2, we started getting bites. And I just said, we can burn up our whole day just running around, or we can sit here and just go back and forth and really milk this area for all that it's worth. So we were finding this hydrilla, and like I said, they were just in clumps. It was not everywhere, but you would come to these larger clumps, and you can see how they get dark red. You could tell that they were thick, and those would be the areas where we'd get those bites. And I wanted y'all to see this picture. This is with the lake down, guys. Again, Google Earth is a huge tool to rely on, especially with the way our lakes draw down. And you can see on here, as you come into this slough from the left, you can see that the small little humps that are throughout. You can see the ditch that comes back to this spawning bay here towards the bottom of the screen. And this is actually that spawning bay there at the bottom of the screen is where Andy Hodges and Keith Lester were catching their fish. So you can tell that these fish were staging up on the humps where Dad and I were fishing and then moving back to them. So I definitely think you give them a couple more days, and those big girls were going to be moving on back. But Dad and I were fishing the areas that are in the red. I would consider those areas shaded in with the yellow to be the spawning areas. And we literally stayed in that ditch line where the blue is and just threw into that shallower grass, and we're working that back on us. So we were basically intercepting those big girls as they were moving back. And that was the biggest key, was staying out there on that main part of the slough channel and fishing those stopping points that those fish were going to be on. And those were just those high spots, and they were just using those contours to move back there.
And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for fishing slow and consistent and staying in one spot.
And see, Kelsey knows me. Kelsey knows me. Kelsey and his dad they're magicians. I've never seen somebody be able to fish 4 tournaments on half a tank of gas and never fill it up. But they can put a trolling motor in the water. They know how to drop a trolling motor in the water and fish and just go fishing, and they catch fish doing it. And I've always envied them, but I always have this little voice in the back of my head of like, oh, let's go check this out. Let's go check this out. And where
we all do.
I know, but where Kelsey can slow it down and they can milk an area, I'll burn 2 tanks of gas and have burn up the whole lake. I'll go see the whole lake. I think about Hartwell that time. Me and Dad ran all the way to Clemson. Y'all like, what are y'all doing? Why are y'all running that far? We're catching fish over here.
We watched you pass this like 4 times.
I'm sorry. I just got to see the whole lake. So I did a lot better of it this time. I was like, okay, I'm going to calm down. Like, I'm going to settle in here. And we did. We milked that area for all it's worth. And you can see the fish on here. They'll pop up in the areas where we caught them. But like I said, we started up here at the top, and we worked our way following that channel into the slough, and we caught fish on both sides. The better grass was over here on the lower side of the screen, where you can see more of the fish catches. But we did catch some on both sides of that channel. But the key here, and I put it up here to remember, is during the pre-spawn, areas are going to reload. Fish are going and fish are coming. Me and Dad could have also been catching post spawners out there, because there had already been probably some waves of fish move in and spawn.
Yeah.
But finding those stopping points is super key, because you could be catching fish that are either coming into the spawning areas or going out. But there's 2 good things about fish that are going in or coming out. What are they thinking about, Kelsey, before they go to spawn? What is the one thing they want to do?
Food.
food, and they want to feed
Food.
up. So
Oh yeah.
you've got them thinking about the right thing. I've struggled sometimes with like trying to catch bed and bass and spawning fish because once they get into that pairing up mode,
It's tough. It's
they're not
tough to get
always
them to
thinking
do
about
something.
yeah, they're not always thinking about eating. So
It's more of a protect. They're trying to protect their area, and that it's not a
exactly
eating mentality. So I mean,
right.
that's what you got to think about. You got to think about throwing baits in there that's a predator to whatever their eggs, their whatever they're
Yeah.
laying.
Yep. Yep. Totally agree. So that was the key. And that's why I kind of, we don't get to bed fish as much around here. I feel like these fish,
Not
I feel like our
really.
fish spawn deeper than bass on, say, further down the Tennessee River, or definitely like you would say down in Florida or down in Texas
Yeah,
or
and
Hartwell.
I feel like our window's much smaller
Yeah.
than other places too, just with the inconsistencies of the weather. So I mean, if they get the chance or whatever that phase,
Yeah.
they're up and they're gone.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Well, they
it's
have to,
such a short
and then
window.
the water level as well. I mean, they don't know if the water level
Yeah,
today is going to be over their heads, and then tomorrow the eggs are going to be dry.
yeah.
So, but going into day two, like I said, once we had found some fish, we just went back and forth and worked it real heavy. I did want to talk about the two fish at the top of the screen there. You can see that coming into this slough, we caught two fish. It was funny because we came in and there was a stump. We caught one. Of course, tail's bloody, so you know she's a female. She's been up there working the bed. And then coming back out, we stop on the same stump. And this is why I talk about places reloading. We caught the
Hmm.
buck, and he was about 2.5 pounds, but he had moved back up there into the same area where she had been. So that was a huge key, was going back through these areas and catching some retreads. So the go-to baits for me and Dad. All right, the chatterbait in two colors, the chartreuse and white you can see there. The other one is a bluegill color. And bluegill is, as Kelsey said, a major enemy to
Oh
the
yeah.
to their eggs. We weren't quite in that area of where they would have been spawning, but also the bluegill is a major food source for them, and that's going to
Hmm.
be the very next thing to move in and spawn really in these coming months is the bluegill. So they're going to be also eating bluegill full on, and then, like I said, Dad
Oh
was
yeah.
throwing that lipless crankbait, which is another one that can come through that grass pretty well, and you can cover water pretty quickly. But the chartreuse and white, I'd make a pass, and then after we made that pass, I'd pick up the bluegill color and come right back down the same way we just come with a different color, just to change things up for them, so that they could see something a little bit different. Now, Dad with that lipless crankbait wasn't his was much more, well, he's going to fish it like a silver buddy. That's what he likes to do. He likes his
Yeah.
silver buddy, and
Yeah.
he's going to kind of just lift and hop that thing. And he was much more, I want to say, subtle with how he was working it. And his bites were more of just when he would pick back up after it would drop, it'd just be mush.
Hmm.
So it was kind of your traditional lipless crankbait bite that you might think of even earlier into the year.
Yeah.
Um,
More toward like end of winter.
Yeah. So, but it was something he could cover water with. Other guys were talking about a top water bite, and Dad tried to get something going on top. But we just never. We never. Well, I'll take that back. We had a couple buzzbait bites super early in the morning, but we never could get anything on like a walking style bait over that grass. And I just don't know if they didn't want to come up there and commit to something like that. It was still a bunch of reaction strikes, and guys, you're going to see that in this video right here that I'm getting ready to show. They wanted us to impart some action on the bait. The whole time I'm sitting there, it comes down into the grass. I'm ripping it out. I'm popping it. I'm killing it. And you're going to see, especially, definitely check out the video that's going to drop after this recap video. We had enough video, guys. I got video from the Snyder boys. I got video from Wiley and Fred. So we're going to have video from all three boats. So you're going to see some different styles of fishing, but you can definitely see on all the catches that Dad and I have that the bait is being either ripped out of the grass when they eat it, or I kill it and it's falling. So it's that change in motion. So I'm going to let this video play and we'll talk about what's going on here. So the biggest thing is once I cast out, I'm going to let it sink to the bottom. It's not that deep, so it doesn't take very long. But I was keeping myself about 20 to 30 feet off these grass clumps. And that would allow me to make about a 60-foot cast and then bring it to it. But you're going to see here that as it comes into the grass, I'll pop it to try to clean it off. And I'll do that multiple times as it continues to get hung up, especially as it gets to the heavier clump. And you see there that he eats right after that last freeing from the grass. So it was definitely a reaction strike coming out of that grass. And that was the biggest key to every single one of our bites. Even the big girl, I was literally popping it through the grass, and I found probably the nicest grass clump, Kelsey, that I saw anywhere on there. And I even told Dad, you'll see in the video when it drops later, you'll hear me. He just caught one. He puts it in the live well. He's getting his rod. He stands back up, and I go, "Hey, dude, there's a nice grass clump." Dunk. And as soon, like mid sentence, there, oh, dude, she just throttled it. And man, when she came up, oh, my heart was just, it was pounding. And she wouldn't go to one side of the boat. She just stayed right out at the front. So Dad's reaching out there as far as he can in front of the trolling motor. I've got that rod tip up trying to keep her coming. And I'm like, "Do you got her? Do you got her?
Boat flips only.
Oh gosh, dude, no.
Boat flips only.
No, not on this one. And he's like,
yeah, I did it with the 6.5. I believe you. I believe in you.
You had to have the momentum though. So you had the momentum. She was coming so fast. You just had the momentum, dude.
Yeah.
And when he said, "I've got her," I let the rod relax. And when I did that, bait just fell out of her mouth. So it's like one of those that you had to keep her coming. So let's talk about that really quick. My setup for this. Dad's throwing a cranking stick with that lipless. So it's a really parabolic, soft rod.
Oh yeah.
I'm throwing a medium action 7-foot with a 6:4-to-1 gear ratio reel. So it's also really soft. And that's huge with a chatterbait. They've got good size hooks on them, and I'll throw a heavy line, but you still want that rod to give a little bit when they inhale it, so that you're not.
You want a fast tip, but a good backbone. Really, that's what you want. You want that forgiveness in the tip, and the backbone to drive it home.
Right, exactly. Well said. Because you've got that bigger hook on these jackhammer chatterbaits and other chatterbaits, so you've got to be able to drive it through. But man, when they come in there and they inhale it, you got to give them a chance to get it. So that medium action rod is huge. You don't want a really stiff rod. You don't want a flipping stick. I know you're around grass, but you don't want to rip that bait away from them. So keep that in mind when you're throwing a chatterbait or when you're working around grass. It's also why a lot of guys throw braid. They let that braid be the super strong part. They let that braid do some of the hook setting for them, but they use the softer, more limber rod to help them have better hookup ratios when those fish come up and eat it. So, but that was a blast down there, Kelsey. Me and Dad doing some hindsight though, like people down there were catching a lot of fish. And I think I even told you this on the phone on the ride home. Like, if I was not tournament fishing, I would not have caught those fish, because we got 4 bites on day 1. We got 5 bites on day 2. Like, that is all the bites we got. I think we might have had maybe 1 extra on each day.
I know exactly what you mean.
And it's like, it was still a grind. I mean, the weights looked good. We won the tournament, but at the same time, it was not like we went down there and caught 20 or 30 fish a day.
Well, I mean, if you look at some of the tournaments in previous years, I mean, you think about, I want to say the last tournament, out of town tournament that I got to partake in was on Chick, and we were doing a 3 fish limit at that time.
Yeah.
And really, I had to work hard for those 3 fish. Now, granted, they were the right fish. I mean, just working some of the same areas through day 1, day 2, but there was, while we were down there in practice, there was one pocket that I can think of specifically that every time I pulled in there, there's a 4-pounder almost guaranteed. Just where is it?
Definitely. Yeah. So sometimes you just got to grind, and it's figuring out what is going to be a bite that, or a pattern that gets you quality, or are you going after quantity? And it just depends. Cause like I said, it was disheartening sometimes, because Snyder would text me and we'd kind of communicate throughout the day, and both days they had their limit in like 30 minutes. And I'm like, what in the world? And he's like, yeah, we got 5, but they only weigh like 6 pounds, and they'd found some spotted bass. But it still gets inside your head because you're like sitting here going, well, man, I'm getting like one bite every 2.5 hours.
Yep.
Like I wish I was getting some more bites to keep me in it. But ultimately, it was the right bites. We were on the right pattern for what was going on. Those fish were coming to us.
Hmm.
They were moving back in there. I'm sure that Hall and Hamilton they were on a similar deal, just not with the grass. Them being down the lake, it kind of turns into a little bit deeper section of the lake, a little bit steeper bank somewhat, but there's a lot more docks. So I think for
Oh
them,
yeah.
they were still finding pre-spawn girls, but they were setting up on docks instead of setting up on grass clumps. So that was the big key. And then, like I said, um, Keith Lester and Andy Hodges were back here in the same slough, and they were just kind of ahead of that movement. They were catching those bucks that were moving up, so everybody was kind of finding that they were moving constantly. But ultimately, guys, we had a great turnout. I think we had 15 or 16 boats that came and competed with us, which was great. I think ultimately everybody did catch a fish. Everybody weighed something in. So nobody zeroed both days, which was great. But I can't say enough of how much fun it was to come down there and fish with y'all. Blue Water let us weigh in on their site, which was awesome of them, because otherwise we were going to have to go back into Dayton and fight with 200 boats to try to get weighed in, so Blue Water saved our lives on that one. So that was awesome. I can't say enough about that. Guys, if you got any other questions about what went on here, like I said, check out the videos that are coming. We're going to have a day 1 and a day 2 video. Drop some comments in on this video. I can answer those for you, give you some more information if you want it. But Kelsey, let's head on to our next one with Douglas. So here in just a little over a week, we are heading to Douglas Lake. It's a May tournament, probably hands down one that most everyone is excited about. Probably marked on their calendars when they saw the schedule come out. Douglas, we know you're going to catch fish.
Oh yeah.
It's a 12-inch limit, so we're going to have keepers. And there's the potential for still some really, really good bags to come in on Douglas.
I agree. And honestly, right now, I think the way we're catching it, I don't think you're going to have a problem catching them deep. I don't think you're having a problem catching them shallow. I think
I'm
we're going to have some. I know that there's some people catching them deep right now as it is.
Yeah,
I've seen the pictures, and I mean, you can look at those fish, and they're white.
Yeah, so
basically,
so they're out there, and so with a May tournament, guys, the good thing is you're kind of getting more into the post spawn, so the weather's not going to hurt them quite as bad like it would if we were very much pre spawn. But really quick, let's look at the weather. I do like the fact that we're on a warming trend here. It looks like that front's coming through. It may hurt us a little bit that it's coming through there on Thursday, so we're going to be like still going to be post frontal. But things are warming up. Wind doesn't look to be too bad. And the other thing that I like to see is if you look at that water level over there on the right hand side,
starting to plane out.
Oh yeah, she's probably going to be full pool when we get there.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead, Kelsey. We're gonna stop sharing this and we'll get back to just us. But I'm with Kelsey. You're gonna have fish in all 3 phases. You're going to have probably just a few pre-spawners left, and it really depends on, I think, what section of the lake you're in. I went back and they had the Bassmaster Open there the same week that we were down on Chick, and they were talking about bed and bass. So there's already been a good wave of fish move up. So Kelsey, what are you thinking? Are you thinking you're gonna focus on post spawn? You're gonna look for a little bit of spawn action, or what are you thinking?
My honest game plan is to go deep. Just the time of year, it's laying out pretty good. I don't know about the weather as much right now. Is what I'm looking at right now, is because that does throw a little uncertainty into my plan because of just what the weather's doing. I'd like to see it a little bit warmer, a little more consistent. But I do think, and I mean, I have seen pictures, I've seen graphs. I know that they're out there, so I got to stick with my plan.
Yeah,
that I'm going to go deep. I've had good success this time of year in that deep water.
yeah,
And I think
and I'm thinking the
it's going to
same
be
thing
good.
that you are. Like, I don't think the water temperature is going to be as warm as what maybe we were thinking. But still, these fish, as far as the spawn goes, they're running more off of length of days, I feel like.
Hmm.
So, like, the length of days has been there now for a full month. They've had
Yes.
plenty of time to spawn. We know that most of your big girls go early. So, the further you get into that spawn, the smaller the size of the females typically are. So, I'm with you. Now, the only different thing that I'm going to try to do is I feel like, and I know that getting into May, you're going to get into a shad spawn.
Hmm.
So it's like we're not hitting a major moon phase, and that hurts me a little bit with that because with the full moon, there's going to be a shad spawn. So I feel like the really good shad spawn is going to be that May 24th, May 25th when the full moon
Yeah.
comes back around. But I'm like, there still should be some fish that are hanging out up there. They're waiting for it. They know it's coming. So I'm going to try to key in on that first thing early in the morning, but then I'm jumping out there with you. I'm heading deep. I'm heading offshore. Like I talked about with Chick, those fish that are coming in or coming out are thinking about
Hmm.
feeding. They're not thinking about bedding. They're not thinking about pairing up with somebody. And if they're out there eating, they're gonna have some bellies on them, right, dude?
Oh yeah.
So if you're going out deep, what kind of what kind of depth we talking about?
I mean, anywhere from 50 to 20 foot. I
I
mean,
know, right?
really,
They can spread
I've
out.
caught them, and they can spread out. Really, the main thing you want to focus on is hard bottom.
Yeah.
You want that hard bottom. That's what those fish. That's what the fish eat on. That's their dinner table. That's their
Yep.
plate.
And they're
They want something they can pin that bait fish to.
gonna push
And
that bait up there.
mhm,
And when it gets in the right spot, man, they're gonna start feeding. But the one thing I'm thinking is I wonder if they'll be set up shallower right now since it's not as hot and we haven't had those really warm days. So like
yeah,
maybe those fish that we
I'm
might have
thinking
caught in 30 foot might be 15 to 20, you know?
I'm thinking anywhere from 15 to 25, honestly. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking they're gonna be in that depth range. Um, but I mean, they could be deeper. I mean,
They
it
could
is a
be.
possibility, but I'm thinking the 15 to 25 foot depth is probably the key range to key in on.
I'm with you there. I do think that that's going to be a big key and a big player. Definitely, you're going to see some fish come in that were caught super shallow, less than 2 foot of water.
Hmm.
You're going to see some big girls found. Um, but it's going to be an interesting to see how it plays out with this mild of a spring that we're having, which I would probably call this a typical spring, a true spring. It just
Yes,
seems like these last few years, it seems like it's always went as soon as you got into May, boom, it was like
it's
75,
hot.
85, like,
It's hot.
and it's just not that way right now. So that's kind of throwing me off. But I am excited about the fact that the water's going to be all the way up.
Hmm.
That's going to help your shallower bite guys a little bit because you're going to have a lot more buck brush in the water. You're going to have those willows in the water, so there's going to be a lot of fish hanging out around that. I think our members are going to have a really fun tournament. I think it's going to be
Oh
something that
yeah.
they can enjoy. It looks like daylight's coming around. Safe flight's about 6:10 right now, so we're going to have a good long time to fish. So key baits. You got three that you can pick, no more. Three baits on the deck all day long. Can't take anything else out of the rod locker. What's it going to be?
Carolina rig, uh, a football head, shaky head
Okay,
type deal.
we'll call that one.
Yeah, a big shaky head, 3/4 ounce, 5/8 ounce.
Yep.
Big shaky head,
All right.
and deep crankbait.
All right. Okay. I like it. I like it. You can go finesse with those dragon baits. You can power through with that crankbait and cover a lot of water. I like that for sure.
Ge- We'll take a second, and I'll be right back, and I'll grab one.
All right, you go get one of those. I'll talk to him about
Yeah.
my three. So, guys, here's going to be my three baits. If I can only pick three going into this day. Now, remember, I'm going to start off shallow before I go deep. So instead of going with three deeper baits, I'm going to start out with spinner bait. That's going to be my number one because I can focus shallow. I can hit that shad spawn. I can focus around some cover, whatever I need. So I'm going to go with the spinner bait first. Then number two, I'm going to go similar to Kelsey. I'm going to have a football jig. Um, I like the Carolina rig, but the Carolina rig is tough for me to put into if I'm trying to make long casts. It's hard to get really long casts out there. Plus, it's very hard for me to be as accurate. So, like if I'm keying in on a rock pile or a specific spot on that point, I find it a lot easier to hit that with a football jig. But like Kelsey said, we're talking 3/4 ounce, guys. You want it to get down there quick. You don't want to be wasting any time. And then my third one is going to be a deep diving crankbait of some kind. This time of year, the 10XD and the 8XD really play on these lakes, especially from now through that next full moon in June. That big crankbait is going to be a player. So Kelsey, I was telling him, I said, if I'm going to go out there, the only thing I'm going to change from you is I'm going to switch out the Carolina rig. I'm going to have a spinnerbait on. I love a spinnerbait.
Yes.
And like I said, for that shad spawn, and guys, one way that you know the shad are spawning, even if they're not up there beating on the banks, look at the blades of your spinnerbait when it's coming back in. If there's shad around it and they're beating up against those blades, they're trying to spawn with it. And if you see that the shad spawn is going on, keep throwing that spinnerbait. But I'm gonna have a spinnerbait. I'm gonna have that big 3/4 ounce football jig, and I'm gonna have a deep crankbait like you going in. If those are the only 3 I can have. Now, if you start letting me pull all my rods out of my tackle, all my storage box, then we're gonna have a jerk bait. We're gonna have a spook. You're gonna have a big swim bait. Might even have a big spoon on there. You know, that can get fun too. I might try to hook dad for some fun or something. You know, just a big old gaplin hook in him.
And when I'm talking about a shaky head, I'm not talking about a little finesse shaky head. I'm talking about a shaky head.
Oh yeah.
This is this is a 5/8. I think it's a 5/8 ounce.
Yep.
Or 3/4, more or less, with a 7-inch Magnum trick worm.
Mag trick worm, boys.
And that'll do some damage out there on those spots.
And here's what's so funny to me, Kelsey. Like, we're not talking about just, oh, you're only catching 5 or you're only catching 5 and 6 pounders, the biggest fish. You'll still catch 2s on those big old worms. I mean, it's crazy, but guys, like I said, this tournament coming up, you're going to be able to do whatever you want to do out there. You're going to be able to get bit however you want to get bit. I think it's going to be a really fun tournament for everybody. I look forward to seeing all of y'all out there. This tournament's actually going to be presented to us by Piney Pawn and Firearms. So they're going to have a gift bag for us, a tackle bag at the upcoming meeting on Monday. Y'all should be seeing this video tomorrow, which is going to be Friday or Saturday at the latest. But they're going to have a tackle bag for us, a prize pack. So make sure you're at the meeting on Monday to be in the drawing for that. But they're sponsoring this event. We want to tell them thank you. We want to tell all of our partners for 2021 thank you. They're making this an awesome year for us. Look forward to having you back, Kelsey, fishing with us on this one next Saturday.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm excited. Get your little mindset change. Get away from the school. Get away from all the textbooks, man. Virtual classes. It's madness. It's needed. Get out in the outdoors a little bit. But guys, thank you all for joining us for this recap video on Chickamauga and previewing Douglas. Like I said, we love doing these. It gives us a chance to kind of reflect on what's been going on, how people were catching their fish, how we were catching our fish, and you just learn a lot from it. So we appreciate y'all. We'll see you for the next one. Check out the videos to come for Chickamauga on day 1, day 2. See you later, guys.
So long.